Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Publisher Podcast from Media Voices. I'm Chris Sutcliffe, and this season, myself, Peter Houston, and Esther Thorpe are exploring the people and products powering publishing, both through this podcast and our adjacent weekly newsletter, which you can sign up for at voices.media. We are really pleased to have BlueConic as sponsors of this season of the Publisher Podcast and newsletter. BlueConic is the customer data operating system that makes your data work harder so you don't have to. Whether it's capturing valuable audience insights or activating them with precision, the possibilities are endless with BlueConic's all-in-one platform. You can learn more at blueconic.com, where data is for doing. Well, everybody knows Dow Jones, or at least a few parts of its portfolio, even if they don't recognize it as part of the greater whole. But as the company moves from a portfolio-based business to a vertical-oriented publishing and information one, how is that actually impacting its backroom strategy and where it looks for acquisitions? Well, Emma O'Brian is SVP Strategy for Dow Jones, and in this episode, she tells me all about how a change in strategy that occurred when Almar Latour came into the role ultimately changed how those publications are aligned and operated behind the scenes. It's a fantastic chat. We're so happy that we managed to get Emma on, and I began by asking her how, in this era of incredibly destabilized media ecosystems, which segments she believes are well placed for success in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This has been, it's a pleasure. Should we start with that? Or
You are more than welcome. Obviously, we are delighted to get you on to have a chat.
Great. So yeah, look, for us, just to take a step backwards, I see call it destabilization in three parts. Obviously the last week and a half, there's been a lot of reflection over where the media landscape has really changed in terms of penetration across the US, but also across the globe. There's a distrust, obviously, in the national media, but that's an opportunity for us because it's a clarifying factor of we need to be where the readers are, where the users are, where the consumers are. And so that's actually a galvanizing opportunity for us in the industry to think about the ways that we can reach more people. And then to your exact question, it's the question of how. So I do believe that having a clear sense of direction and understanding of who your audience is absolutely paramount for being able to deliver the most relevant, most actionable, and most important journalism to specific audiences. So if you're a local news organization, you have to understand who your peers are, who are your communities. For us, obviously, we've got the Wall Street Journal. Mm-hmm. We understand that we know the business reader. We understand what business leaders need to make decisions about their businesses, about the world, understand the world better. And so that can be very clarifying. And I think for us, it allows us to fully grasp who we're talking to. And that allows us to make better decisions about our coverage and then about our amplification strategy or our news distribution strategy. And that's a clarifying thing. Instead of an audience of everyone, it's an audience of professionals. And that helps us to figure out the way we write and the way we distribute.
That's so much easier said than done. We're a relatively small B2B outlet, and even we struggle sometimes to know who our audience is exactly. To your point, we know they're professionals. We know that they are looking for those key insights. But my God, it's difficult sometimes to look at the analytics alone and figure out who these people are. So I can't even imagine how many orders of magnitude more difficult that is for your team.
It is definitely an oversimplification to even characterize it as you just have to be where your audience is. Of course you do. That's where the eyeballs are. But if I could talk a little bit about the way Dow Jones is structured, because we are the Wall Street Journal, but we're not just the Wall Street Journal, and we're definitely not the index, which is obviously a point of confusion for many people, understandably so. So the journey that we've been on since Almar Latour became CEO in 2020 was really to help us move from a portfolio strategy to a more enhanced ecosystem where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So what does that look like in practice? We have realigned our brands and those audience segments based on verticals and business and audience types. So we've got business news, which is the Wall Street Journal. We've got wealth and investing, which serves anyone from wealth and asset managers all the way to retail investors. We have an energy vertical, which helps customers manage costs, make purchasing decisions, and adapt to changes in the global energy market. We have risk and compliance, which provides risk management data and tech solutions to help our customers manage regulatory and reputational risk. And then, of course, we have Factiva, which is a database of over 33,000 licensed news content assets, and so those all help us to understand our audience better and to really understand how we serve the energy vertical. Okay, so it's not just going to have to be coverage that we get out of our Opus and CMA businesses. How can we find ways to tie the pieces together in a much stronger ecosystem in order to derive the most value for the users? Same thing with wealth and investing. How do we take Barron's MarketWatch, IBD, and create an offering that is respectful of the brands that are included in that vertical, but then also enhance the usability of each of those brands.
And that's such a rarefied space to be in. It's obviously as a result of very, very considered and effective investments over the past, however long Dow Jones has been going at this point. But what you were talking there about kind of being very careful to be mindful of kind of users' needs, and sort of at the same time you have this need to develop new commercial opportunities. So what has that portfolio-based approach actually added in terms of commercial opportunities for you?
Yeah, thank you for asking, because that's a good one. When we do an event, if we have an event in the energy space, we can bring in Wall Street Journal reporters to both ask the questions and be experts. We've built a energy insider newsletter for Barron subscribers, which is actually we monetize separately from Barron's, to provide insights on the energy space to investors and those in the financial markets. And that's much more applicable, much more relevant to maybe some of the regular coverage, which is like, okay, who's up, who's down, what's happening in markets, where's the portfolio going, really to help them understand with a much more financial lens what's happening in energy markets as well, and understand the energy transition.
That's such a tangible example as well, but I suppose that is equally applicable to so many of the things you are currently doing with your portfolio. It makes so much sense that there is that synergy between, parts of the portfolio that actually do add up to a real benefit for your audience and your different audience cohorts as well.
Yeah, and it allows us to have best-in-class services too. So we've got a centralized marketing system. We've got a centralized product team, and obviously one of the things that we did not touch on yet on disruption is technology and the evolution of technology and how it's disrupting our business. But there's also opportunity there, and we see that there's opportunity. And so where we can have, if we develop, like just this week, we announced smart summaries in Factiva, which allows us, it's a Gen AI tool that allows us to summarize a query. Obviously, that's something that customers are demanding. Well, that's not just something that's going to live on Factiva. That's a product that we'll be able to bring across all of our portfolio and enhance the user experience over time in each of our verticals. And so that's a successful use case for us that we really like.
Well, I know we're going to talk about technology in a bit and that disruption angle, because it's omnipresent as an issue.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I want to touch upon in terms of that portfolio approach before we get there is, having spoken to places like the FT, a couple of the kind of the wider B2C publications as well, those who operate with a portfolio often operate under kind of that North Star model. Now, given how specialized a lot of the portfolio is at Dow Jones, is that the case there? And if so, what is that North Star?
Yeah. Our mission is to provide the most trusted news, information, and analysis to help people make better decisions. And that is true across our portfolio. That's true in our branding. That's true in everything that we do has to answer that question. So it actually doesn't matter if you're a project manager in one vertical or a reporter in another. That's the question that you need to answer. And one of the things that I find is our greatest strength at Dow Jones, and why I'm so delighted, pleased, happy, chuffed to be here.
Good use of chuffed.
Thank you.
Love the use of chuffed.
Yeah, is the opportunity to provide transparency in times of volatility, and that's how we assess our moment. That's how we assess our value, and that we go to market and being able to say, hey, there's an energy transition happening. We have all of these energy assets to in our vertical to help you solve answer the questions that you have about your business, about where to invest, about decisions that you should be making, about regulation and things that are changing. 2024 was had the most elections in recent history across the globe, and that's a change in regulation, and that's something that we can help provide transparency around for geopolitically, or or in energy markets regulation and beyond.
God, that's such a deceptively simple North Star, but at the same time, it's got that kind of gravity, not to make a physics pun or whatever, but it's kind of got that gravity to it where it must pull everybody across the entire portfolio, all the titles together, whether you're backroom, whether you're a journalist, whether you're working on the commercial side or the editorial side, towards that goal of kind of simplifying and explaining to people, really providing them with the information they need, which actually sounds really, really fun.
It is, and as you know very well, journalists are very mission driven, and the fact of the matter is, everything that we do is derived from journalism. So even on the B2B side of the house, even in our business information services side of the house, everything comes and springs from a journalistic ethos, and so that really helps us to engage our employees and our customers, and to say, we have to find the single point of truth, or we have to explain something in a way that is not hysterical or reactive, but really take a sober approach to explaining what's happening in whether it's energy markets or risk and compliance or sanctions updates across the world, and obviously financial markets too. So we have that ability and that desire to answer that question across the entire portfolio, and that's what makes us, I think, pretty sticky and pretty effective in our businesses.
And not being hysterical or hyperbolic is kind of the anathema of what's going on in a lot of the media landscape at the moment. So that's a USP for sure.
Yeah.
Internally, though, I wondered how do you ensure that there is that alignment around that goal on a day-to-day basis? Very practical question, I know. It always seems like it's a constant process rather than a sort of one and done.
Yes to all the above. We have consistent messaging from the top down, and then also from the bottom up, and even horizontally. We have our goals, we have our targets, we have the North Star, and we repeat it again and again and again. And really being able to show and tell examples of where that success has borne out is really part of the thing. And so we've built out our communications team to be really dynamic in this way. And they're in every meeting, they're in every conversation, because there's a consistency of message that needs to happen internally and externally. And that we've found to be very powerful.
I just think that's so fascinating, the role of the internal marketing within an organization, particularly like yours, where there is so much going on, because it always feels like it doesn't get enough recognition or respect almost, because it really does aid with every aspect of the business, making sure that everybody knows what is going on and who's doing what and where the opportunities are.
There are cross-business initiatives that we want to make sure people understand. Back to the AI conversation.
Yeah.
Does everyone understand AI? Does everyone understand the use cases?
No.
Does everyone understand how it's showing up in their workplace, in their workflow, in their output? And so even things like how do we make that a priority, and how do we make sure that we are taking a talent-driven approach to upskilling and cross-skilling and understanding, helping people and I keep using our energy business as an example, because we only acquired that a few years ago, and so it's top of mind from an integration perspective. How are we taking the best practices from their work and bringing it into Dow Jones, and then similarly, how are we taking what we do really well at Dow Jones and helping to lift them up and investing in their talent and their products and bringing them into a product ecosystem that allows us to capture the greatest opportunities there. And so it's talent, it's operations, it's products. Everything needs to be swimming in the same direction.
And I would love to get on to some of the practicalities around that as well. But just briefly, before we move on to the kind of the portfolio side of things, From a reader's point of view, a consumer's point of view, an audience's point of view, what are those visible and invisible benefits of having that alignment, all that together, and that kind of the benefits of the internal marketing, having that North Star? What do you think audiences sense, whether it's tangibly or slightly subconsciously, that is, a benefit of that approach?
Definitely more visible. I mean, personalization is something that we talk about in the industry all the time, and again, the AI of it all. but it isn't just technology that's helping us to personalize. So I don't mean if you go to WSJ.com or DowJones.com, if you're going to be shown stories that you would click through about what's your favorite exercise, or the type of stuff that is my kind of fun to read, and it's not the eat your vegetables journalism being forced down your throat. It's the best of both, and we have to find the ways, and we are finding the ways to bring in, like, again, with the Barron's Energy Insider newsletter. That's the best. That's a good version of how we can showcase, okay, we know the audience in wealth and investing. We know who the Barron's audience is, but are they being served fully by the journalists and the reporting that we have that are covering the commodities space? Yes, we have those reporters, but we also have major expertise in our other verticals, and so bringing that energy expertise in from these analysts and the analysis that comes out of energy is really a good example for how that will show up. So you're getting your Barron's coverage every day. We are now also understanding that there's volatility in other areas that do affect you. And guess what? We have services and information to help you understand that as well.
Nice. I mean, I'm stealing the phrase "eat your vegetables" journalism, by the way. That's going to go into my regular stock of phrases.
Yeah. But it's important too, because you have to have both. You have to be able to serve someone information that they would like to know and the information that they need to know. And a lot of times, and this is a challenge in journalism overall, a lot of times it feels like there's an editor saying you have to eat your vegetables, you have to read this story about what's happening in Gaza, and you do, but it's not as fun. And so there's an element of a healthy media diet that needs to also be married to, or find an alignment with, the stuff that metrically gets high engagement. So you have to do both, and the companies that do it right, the media businesses that can figure out the right way to do it, will be the ones that succeed.
And how widespread do you think is that recognition at the moment? Because there are, I can think of a couple of publications off the top of my head, portfolios, media businesses that do one or the other. And they don't seem to, well, I suppose it's incredibly difficult to actually do both sides and actually give them equal prominence and make sure that people do have that healthy media diet. How widespread is that recognition? Do you think it's becoming more widespread?
It should be, in my opinion. It should be. And I don't think it needs to be one or the other. And I think getting that balance right, again, between the vegetables and the healthy media diet, while also understanding that sometimes people just want to have more fun with it. So I will sit on, we're all on TikTok, we're all on Instagram, we're all, on the platforms, and those
we're all
are
on Blue
fun.
Sky now.
Right. And so we're all having fun, and that's the stuff that, if you're only looking at a product driven metric, of course there's high engagement. Of course there's a lot of interaction. Of course people spend hours on this product or this game or this activity, this video. And there's a big divide between that experience and the experience of maybe our app or the way that we surface our information and our news. There is a place for both, and they both, not all companies need to do the same thing, but for us, finding a balance between those two things is going to be really important. And I think companies that do that, there will be others that do that, and they'll do it well.
Nice, fantastic. Well, fingers crossed that becomes a little bit more explicit in other company strategies. But where are you looking for there to be opportunities for synergy, for investment, and where does that actually impact where you look to invest?
Yeah, it's sort of three questions in there. The first one, the first one is I'll go into kind of our internal product. So it's no surprise in any of these kind of portfolio companies that you've got, 100 different CMS
Yeah.
operating systems. You've got 20 different platforms. You've got all these different services, and this is even before you're thinking about new acquisitions.
You
And
honestly
so
nearly gave me a panic attack when you said 120 different CMSs.
right. I mean, so that's I'm
Horrendous.
being definitely being hyperbolic here, but but there are there can be dozens and different operating systems, and so you can't even take the best of what's working in another business or another workflow if you don't have a synchronized system across all of your businesses. So just from that perspective, we're working on that the back end platform so that we can all share the best practices, technologically speaking, and beyond. And then when we're looking at acquisitions and when we're thinking about our growth strategy, anything, because we're working on this platform approach, anything that we bring in, if it is a technology enhancement, it might come in via a discussion around or a specific strategy around enhancing a vertical or one of our businesses, but it also has to be something that we can incubate and move across the entire portfolio. And so by having, like I said earlier, by having the tech platforms, by having tech centralized, by having marketing centralized, it allows us to continue to have those conversations. Even finance, obviously, is a centralized function, but they can help us understand how to allocate and make decisions about those internal investments, organic investments that will help us to scale in a really important way. So it starts with the granular at times, but the goal is to always scale.
So, and we've spoken there about how Dow Jones has laid the groundwork in a lot of ways to make itself sustainable, to make sure that it is scaling, and to make sure that it is serving audiences who are increasingly fragmented across a variety of apps, sites, different consumption methods. But what predictions do you have? And we can address that from two ways. One, from a business perspective first, and then we can go into tech, because I know there's so much coming down the pipe in terms of tech.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of changes that we're going to see in the coming years, and if we start thinking about the election and the retrenchment of news organizations to really thinking about the growth strategy, it was clear that so much of our audiences or our desired audiences were getting news on platforms like the TikToks and the Instagrams and even other platforms that are not in the same breadth. And so it's probably no surprise, but that kind of very visual audience and is really engaged and really needs good news and needs good journalism. And so the old pivot to video that I think 10, 15 years ago became a joke.
We used to talk about it all the time, but I hadn't heard it for years, and then all of a sudden,
exactly. And I think this is back. I think this is back in a different way. So maybe it'll it's dressed up in we have to be back in vertical video, and maybe the pivot to video from the 10, 15 years ago was much more linear. This has got to be much more dynamic and much more friendly for those different platforms, the Snapchats, the TikToks, the Instagrams, and so on. So pivot to video will come back. That's one of my predictions. But hopefully no one will make a joke out of it, because it is really important, and it's highly it's essential for us, and not just us, Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones, for us in the industry, to make sure that we are reaching people where they want to be reached, and where they're consuming their news. And then to something you said earlier, the hyper focus on specific audiences, I think is that will be emerging. We have to know who we're talking to. I get a hit in my stomach when I think about certain other competitors or other folks in the industry where their audience is everyone, and it's so hard because your TAM is everyone, and you can't please everyone, and you not that you need to please everyone, but you can't reach everyone. And so you're only setting yourself up to fail, and it gets very, very difficult to understand who you're talking to. And so I was at Bloomberg before this. I was at Atlantic Media before that.
Oh, right.
The Atlantic knows exactly who they're talking to.
Yeah.
National Journal, which was part of the Atlantic Media, knows exactly who they're talking to in Washington. And similarly, where I was at before I came to Dow Jones, Bloomberg knows exactly who they're talking to. And that has, I felt like, been a cheat code for me in terms of my business initiatives and the understanding of audience and understanding what their needs are. It puts me at a step ahead of people who are still trying to define that. And so the hyper focus on specific audiences, I think, needs to continue, while also not losing the connective tissue that the other broader media companies are still serving. So again, we have to do both. But I do think there's going to be more hyper focus on specific audiences. And then this is my bridge to answering your tech perspective question. But data is news, obviously, or data are news, depending on who you're talking to. And so that means the ability to sift through data, tell data-driven stories, understand how to use technology to find anomalies in data and break a big story. That's really important. On the flip side, news is data. And so with the advancements of technology, of Gen AI, it allows us to take unstructured data in words and articles and other information that's handwritten, to not actually handwritten, but that's written word, and translate that into insights. And so where we have an opportunity to take news's data, that's an early opportunity that we haven't quite seen fully realized yet, because it's the OpenAIs of the world, it's the Googles of the world. They're all doing it, and the platforms have been ahead of us. But for media companies to really figure out, we're on a goldmine of information, we're on a goldmine of regularly updated new information. The reason OpenAI is making so many, having so many relationships and licensing agreements is because they see the value of that. And if you're putting together an LLM and it's, as they all say, garbage in, garbage out, we have gold, and it's gold in and gold out. So we really need to, as an industry, continue to appreciate that we have trusted information. We now have the technology to extract in high amounts of data from our unstructured data, which is our news articles. And so we have to unlock that. And some are, and we are working on it, and there are advancements, but it's that's a big one. And that's the technology prediction.
I mean, that's so exciting for so many different reasons. I've seen already that we're in the foothills of that at the moment, I think.
Yeah.
And we've seen some fascinating stories already come out about, you said gold in, gold out, but sometimes I feel like it's, gold in and then some new exotic element coming out. Because we're sort of seeing this marriage of really good data sets with, to your point, this expertise that publications have on that. I saw a fantastic piece about carbon dioxide and sort of where that's being generated. And then it was married to some really good storytelling chops about, what does that actually mean for investment in sort of renewables and everything. And it was only possible because this place had invested so much in actually doing some really good data work internally and having the tech to do that. It was fascinating from a storytelling perspective. And there are much far smarter people than me who will be able to turn that into commercial opportunities as well, because it's telling information stories in a way that will matter to some very, very lucrative clients.
Yeah, and that's exactly. Thank you for teeing up my next point on personalization. Is that you've just outlined an example where it is relevant to a particular audience, and so where you have where you have a particular vertical that has deep understanding of or has deep understanding of what's happening in those markets, deep reporting, high understanding of the audience and their needs, and then also a wealth of information across the portfolio beyond just your hyper focused vertical, that can help us provide insights. And so when you have news data and analytics, if you overlay events and convening power and this advanced technology, it creates a flywheel effect to allow us to hyper personalize what people are actually looking for and what people really need, and that's something that's replicable across each of our verticals, and that's certainly someplace where we're putting in some investment.
And I don't know whether you agree with this or not, but it also seems that you have an advantage in that space in that you have the provenance. You have your brands, which are very trusted. They're very well known. So when you are telling these stories and you are providing this information, in this kind of sea of data, you said crap in, crap out before, you can actually...
That's not what I said, to be clear. Garbage.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But in that kind of space, you can then marry that to your brands. and say, well, look, you can have reassurance that what we are providing is, of the highest quality, despite the fact it's a relatively new discipline as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
Which
exactly.
is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think because the tech companies have been farther ahead on understanding and unlocking the technology, obviously, we are now in a position where we continue to understand the value of our journalism. We fight for IP rights regularly. That is something that we at Dow Jones, News Corp, everyone here feels very strongly about this, that we have to protect those rights. And at the same time, while the the tech companies are nipping at our heels, we are now integrating technology for ourselves and technologists and other people from across other industries to help us unlock that. Because you're absolutely right. We have some of the most trusted brands, trusted journalism, most highest integrity of standards for our news. And so what we bring to the table in terms of solutions with that in mind is something that we can stand up and say, this is trusted. We've had our eyes on it. And yeah, I mean, trust is another one of those mission statements, but it is so important to what we do every day.
In general, then, we've spoken about a lot of the potential pitfalls, but we've also spoken about a lot of opportunities for publishers. We've also spoken about some of the unreplicable advantages that Dow Jones has. Heading into 2024, 2025, and beyond. Did I say heading into 2024? My perception of time is completely
out of 2020. I know,
yeah.
My God. And we're on a weird fiscal. So we've been in fiscal 25 for 6 months already. And so now it's like we're actually going to hit 25, but now we're talking about 26. So I have no idea
it's
where we
ridiculous. Yeah. Let's just say we're in the mid 2020s and just have done. But heading out of that era that we're into and into the next 5-10 years, where do you foresee Dow Jones being a leader within the media ecosystem and really an example for people who want to make sure that their media business isn't just sustainable, but growing as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of looking at your own homework and doing your own homework and not copying what other people are doing and not reacting to what other people are doing. So you definitely need to look at the industry. You need to look at your peers. You need to look at your competitors and think about what they're doing. And maybe there are some best practices when we have, media events and things that we can information share. That's important, of course, but really to understand where our ethos is. And I mean, we want to be number one in everything that we do. And yet we are peerless in so many different ways. We could be number one in risk. We could be number one in different elements of risk. I mean, you could just break down that business into so many different parts and compare ourselves to so many different companies. And so at the high level, we've been around since the 1880s. And so we clearly know who we are. And to try and to be in an industry where so much of it is reactive won't serve us. We want to be proactive, not react to themes or forces or the pivot to video. Although, of course, we all want to do more video. But it's not about what's kind of out there and sexy and what are different people doing and we should have our version of fill in the blank. It's what's going to work best for us. And that has served us before. And so having a strong business plan, understanding the industry, thinking ahead about where the consumer habits are changing and how consumption is changing, and how to protect our journalism. If we do all those things right, then I think we're set up for great success.
That is so hopeful. So I think optimistic, but with an evidence base behind it as well. One thing I do want to pick you up on is you said, everybody wants to be doing more video, but I cannot convince Peter and Esther to do video podcasts no matter how much I try. So I'm like, other than that, though, I think.
I'm not even a video consumer. So this is not. I mean, we can go there or not, but I'm not a video consumer. When I go on Instagram, I watch the reels with the sound off, and so they better have subtitles. Or I'm not the audience for any of that stuff. And if I go on TikTok, it's because I have my earpods in already, and I kind of have this fixated amount of time. So, but I know that I'm not most people, or I'm not most consumers of this stuff. And so actually, that's an important understanding of, we can't, you have to have diversity of thought in some of these leadership conversations and some of these strategic conversations, because if I just did what I thought people were doing based on what I did, we wouldn't do any video. And so we also have to just make sure that we have the right voices in the room and are picking up on the trends and the things that are resonating with different types of people, different ages, different demographics, and make sure that we're giving our best news and information in the way that consumers want, whether it's the way I would do it or not.
I mean, God, we could talk about that. The need to have kind of the right voices in the room for another 5 hours at this point. But you did bring something up there, which I think is a good, a great potential question to finish on. So we've spoken so much there about audience, knowing who your audience is and where there are new opportunities, whether that's through tech or through, kind of the viability of pre-existing brands. But audiences are inevitably going to find content, but how do you decide where not to put it? Where not to extend your brands in a way that isn't appropriate for them? Because it's something that I know so many of our previous guests have struggled with, this idea that, this new platform has emerged or this new opportunity has emerged, but it takes will. I think it takes very strong will to say, let's not throw money at this if we don't think it's right for our audience. So how do you do that when you have such a distributed portfolio?
Yeah, it's definitely about making sure that we've got the ecosystem internally to assess and make quick decisions about whether we should do something or not. And that's part of what we do every day. I mean, and what I said earlier about not being reactive to the latest trend. We do our research. We talk to our customers. We talk to potential customers. We A to B test things. We figure out, whether there's something that can be monetized or not. And then we have to make a smart business decision. And sometimes that doesn't, that turns out to be a not right now. And then we kind of hit snooze on a project and come back to it when either the appetite is right or the audience is right. I mean, you can't do everything. And so having a good business plan with the opportunities ring fenced to do some experimentation and see what works really helps. But again, the idea that we have a plan, we need to do the assessments where there's an additional investment case made that does pay off. We're thinking about longer term strategies as opposed to short term hits and bursts. If there's a strong monetization opportunity, then we'll find a way to do it.
Excellent, Emma. That has been fascinating. Thank you so much. Loads of practical advice that I think people can take out of that, which is really handy for me as well, because I'm going to be writing this up for the website as well.
Great.
Really appreciate that. Normally I'd ask, where can people find you? But you're Dow Jones. So I feel like it's extremely easy for people to find you. But Emma, thank you so much for coming on. It's been absolutely fascinating. Really appreciate that.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Thanks again so much to Emma for speaking to us. Don't forget that we have a write-up of the key learnings from this interview on voices.media, or it's dropped in your inbox every Tuesday if you sign up to the publisher newsletter, also on voices.media. As I said last time, if you haven't, I think so much less of you. We cannot be friends. You will not be getting a Christmas present this year. This season is sponsored by BlueConic, the operating system that puts data into action for marketing and growth doers. The industry-first solution empowers doers with an unmatched range of capabilities to access relevant customer data, create resonant customer experiences, and drive maximum returns for their business. You can learn more at blueconic.com, where data is for doing. We are going to be back next week with another dive into the people and products powering publishing's future. We're also going to be having our Pod in a Pub event, which is going to be extremely fun. There might be 1 or 2 tickets left by the time this goes out on Monday. So if you do want to find out if you can come have a pint and a whinge with us, then do visit voices.media, where there's more information. Until then, you can also keep up with everything to do with Media Voices and the Publisher Portfolio by following us on LinkedIn and subscribing to the Publisher newsletter over on voices.media. But for now, thank you so much for listening, and it is goodbye from me.